So tonight, what I wanted to do before we started the session and the We Agnostics session, and just to let everyone know, we may go over time a little bit because I want to finish this chapter. And if I can see we're not going to finish, then I'll let you know. But this is the kind of chapter where I don't want to leave anything hanging. And I hope we can get it done. But before we do that, you know, a lot of times through this study, and like, if you know me, I often talk about like sometimes the message of the big book, it really gets distorted. And sometimes people in recovery, they don't find what they're fucking looking for, and they might be sober, or maybe they can't stay sober, right? Maybe they can't stay sober, or they're not contented sober. And I think that's a big problem in the rooms of 12-step recovery. So Katie, my friend who I spoke about at the end of one of the episodes, a couple episodes ago, you know, her father had passed away, and, you know, she's this strong pillar who's doing really awesome things. And you know, I shared about her, and she's like really close to my heart, and she reaches out all the time. We've actually only been in person a few times, eh? And so I asked her if she'd come here tonight. She lives on Vancouver Island. She's from Canmore, but she came tonight because she's at home in Canmore on the holidays, and she's going home right away, back to school, back to work on Vancouver Island. But I wanted her to come in and share, like, how long have you been in and out?
I was in and out of the program probably close to a decade.
Okay, so she's been in and out close to a decade. And it was about a year and a half ago where something fucking clicked, and it clicked differently. And that's what I try to do with these big book studies. I try to allow something to click in you so that fucking recovery changes. Because recovery can be what you think it is, but it's actually so much more. In the big book, it talks about tradition 3. You're an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. You have a desire not to drink. You're a member. Fucking great. But that fellowship is not the one that's going to give you vitality. That fellowship of tradition 3 has a lot of fucking around going on in it. And there's a lot of suffering and a lot of people doing fucking others wrong. And, you know, people trying their best. But there's another fellowship here. Bill W. talks about it. I was going to say, Gord talks about it, right? And Gord, we trust.
I do.
But it's the fellowship of the Spirit. You will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and your fellows. Give away freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in what? The fellowship of the Spirit.
See?
And you will surely meet some of us. And I'm not saying that I'm that, but I'm saying that Bill W. said that there's a group of people that are that. And there is vitality there. And so I think, and Katie will describe this better than I, she found a different path in recovery when she thought she was doing recovery. She found the abandon yourself to God part. And it was really about understanding self and really fucking doing what was hard. It's not really, and I'm sure she can talk to this, wasn't that she wasn't trying to do God's will for the 10 years in and out. That's not what the program teaches us. What the program really teaches us is to identify your will and fucking turn that over. Through that is the pain and the hardships, but the lessons and the learning and the growth closer to Creator lies within that process. So, Katie, I wanted you to come up and speak. Do you want to come and sit here? You'll be on screen, okay? And just share for 10 minutes, 15, whatever you feel like, about like what happened and why is it different now and how is it different? Thank you.
All right. Hi guys, I'm Katie. I'm an alcoholic.
Katie.
Yeah, I just I prayed and did a little meditation before I got here, and my hope is just that my message comes across as, you know, solution focused. And it's got humility too, because, you know, like I I'm sitting up here now, but I spent a long time like coming in and out of the rooms. And I think the reason that, I'm able to speak to this now, is not based on like what I know, it's based on what I've done and the experiences that I've had that I can now offer other people. And, a lot of my life, I thought I was stupid. And like the majority of my life, I thought I was stupid. And I thought that it was like knowledge that would make me smarter or have worth or value, right? And it's been in this program that I've seen that, like they say in steps 1, 2, and 3, like self-knowledge will not fix this disease, right? It's not what I know. And I think that the most priceless thing that I found is, the spiritual principles and to actually have the tools to be able to utilize those in my life. So, yeah, just a little bit about my story. Like I won't go into it in too much detail, but I was sick for a long time and I knew I needed help, but I didn't know how to get help. And um, I came in and out of the AA rooms for a long time. I read Steps Off the Wall. I remember even having a sponsor at one point, and like dictating how I was going to do the steps with her, like ordering a book off Amazon and being like, we're going to do it through the Buddhist way, right? And like looking at that now, like it's just so hilarious because it was just self, right? Like I was trying to dictate how I was going to do the steps and I wanted an easier, softer way. And, the result of that is like, it didn't matter what I did. I would always go back to drinking. Like, it didn't matter if I spent 50 days in treatment, it didn't matter what books I read, what therapists I went to, how many meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, 120 meetings in 90 days. It didn't matter. Because I hadn't done any work, right? And they say in I think it's in step 1, like that there is no effective mental defense against the first drink, right? Like it must come from a power greater than ourselves. And so for me, like, I got sicker and sicker and, I eventually got to this spot where like, there was no stopping me once I got like, once I started drinking, and the only thing that was gonna like end that physical allergy was like if some human like actually intervening to get me to stop. And the last time that I drank, I was holed up in a hotel room in Canmore, just going back and forth to the liquor store. And like I'm convinced that I probably would have killed myself somehow if somebody hadn't have shown up. And I wound up in another detox center in Calgary here for, I don't even know the, 10th, 11th, 12th time. And I don't know what was different that time, but I remember there was some people from AA that showed up and they did their spiel and I was at that point like hopeless, like I didn't even know if AA was going to work anymore, anything at that point. And we were leaving the room and for some reason this person called me over and said to me, I don't know why, but I see something in you and I know that you're going to get this. And like that was all it took. It was like that little tiny glimpse of hope that I didn't have in myself, to spark like a hope that maybe there would be something that could help me. And I look back now and I can see God's plan, right? And I was in Calgary for a reason and I wound up in a meeting where I was hearing things that were different than I'd heard in any other meetings. And the sponsor that I picked, she really understood the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she told me, like, Katie, if you want to get better, if you want to stay sober, like, you have to follow this book precisely, right? And so I did, and I worked the steps. Like, I didn't have much of an understanding of what the disease of alcoholism actually was. I didn't understand why, like, I would keep going back to alcohol sober. Like, that part just didn't make sense to me. I didn't realize that that was the actual powerlessness piece. So by going through, with her and her explaining it to me was like when I really started to understand this stuff. And I was like, whoa, okay, like this makes sense. And then it tells me that, like, I have a standing chance if I go through with this, and I have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, right? So that was kind of my initial motivation to really get into this stuff. And along the way, I met people like Bill, and I met a lot of people that shared little nuggets of wisdom that were different than what I'd heard before in the rooms. And I'm really grateful for that, because I don't know right now, like, if I would have gotten sober, if I hadn't had heard that, right? And I hadn't have met those people. And so I really worked these steps like my life depended on it. That my step 3 decision was, to work the steps like my life depends on it, because how was I gonna find that power? It was through the rest of the steps, right? I didn't know God, I didn't know my higher power. How was I gonna find that? Well, it's through the rest of the steps. So I worked the steps, and I did have a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. And, for a long time I thought, okay, that's it. I have a spiritual awakening. I'm good. I had no understanding of steps 10, 11, and 12, because I'd never worked the steps before. And I thought I'd be good. And, I was really motivated, and I was doing the things, and I was going to meetings, and I was practicing 10, 11, and 12, but what I realized in my first year of recovery is that, like, life is life, right? And this is a program that helps me deal with life on life's terms, right? And I didn't know before, like, the amount of pain and grief and things that were actually going to come up this year. And I thank God that I had gotten that understanding, that real understanding that Bill talks about, not that diluted understanding, to start with as a foundation. But that was really my starting point. Like, the spiritual awakening was my starting point. And then, like earlier in this year, I had a really painful experience, and I didn't know what I was doing. And and I remember calling Bill, and Bill being like, "What are you doing, Katie?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm doing 10, 11, and 12. I'm sponsoring this many people." And him saying to me, "Stick with the recipe, stick with the recipe." So it felt like months and months and months. And I was just sitting in this pain. But I had faith that that it would eventually turn around, and it did. And Bill would always say to me, like, "Katie, the lashings continue until the lesson is learned." And that was the case for me. Like, there was still so much self. I'd seen it in 4 and 5, but the real understanding and effectiveness of, like, learning what that means and how it presents itself comes in step 10, in the practice of step 10. And so, I really dug in, and my sponsor, like, I'm so grateful for her, because she's so enthusiastic about this program, and it, like, rubbed off on me, and it made me enthusiastic, and it made me love this stuff and want to do this stuff. And so I continued to work the steps like my life depended on it, and as written in this book That's the key piece as written in this book. Like it's been told to me, like, this is a set of directions and to follow it like a set of directions. And I have to do that. Like I'm a sick alcoholic and I have to do that. And, you know, the real change I think that came for me was when I started sponsoring. And, I can remember years ago, like, people saying, "Oh yeah, you sponsor when you're done the steps," and me being like, "Oh yeah, right, whatever, right?" And you know, this time my sponsor said, "No, Katie, like this, it's your responsibility to sponsor," and you know, even in the first few pages, it says it multiple times, right? Like that's what we do. We help out other alcoholics, and but I didn't realize the gifts that would come from me. And like not only the gift of like seeing other people start to understand this stuff and start to see the lights come on in their eyes and to heal, like I could get emotional thinking about it. Like it's beautiful to watch that happen. And because I know what it's like when you know, like I'm on death's doorstep, right? And then to watch somebody like go through the steps rapidly and with momentum, and like it doesn't take long to see a change, right? And not only that, but like I learn about myself too. Like as you know, I'm going through the book with my sponsees, like I'm reading through the literature over and over and over again. And you know, the way I sponsor is quite intuitive, and it depends on you know, the experiences that are shared with me and what sort of comes to me from God. But, you know, like I've learned so much just from my sponsees, just in taking people through the book. So I'm just so grateful for that. And yeah, and I mean, in it last time or the last big book study, Bill mentioned that my dad passed away and at the end of December. And oh my gosh, like if honestly, I thought I was through the pain. Like this year was already so hard. And then to get that news, and I'm in the middle of school, and, you know, I walked into it and I've never felt like this before, but I was, you know, I felt like I was on the spiritual beam, and I've been doing the things that, you know, they speak of in the book. And I felt like, okay, I can make this decision. I can be there to support my dad. And my dad is an untreated alcoholic. So it was a big decision for me to do that. And I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that I had love in my heart, and I knew that I wanted to do it. So I went to Kelowna to be with him. And through that process, you know, a lot came up. Like there was a lot of self, a lot of self. And I think, you know, like a lot of my wounding, like when that I identified in step 4, and a lot of the things that were blocking me from God, originated in my childhood, right? And so to be around my dad, like those things were triggered on a regular basis. And the amount of inventory that I wrote while I was there is like, I can't even, like, it was just inventory after inventory, and then calling and helping and just doing the things that I've been told to do, right? And through that process, like you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like it wasn't perfect. Like I definitely fell into defect. I definitely was in self at some point, at some points. But the difference is that because this whole year I've been like dedicated to practicing this stuff, especially 10, 11, and 12, and growing in understanding and effectiveness in 10, um, I'm better able to identify self as it comes up. And then once I've identified it, I can call somebody, I can pray, and then I can turn my attention to someone else, someone I can help. And as a result of that, I got to be there with my dad and be actually present with him, right? And to love him and to see that he, you know, just like me, was blocked. He was blocked with all of these things and these pain and this, all this stuff, the self inside of him, right? And I was able to see through that in such a profound way that it like literally touched my soul. Like I looked into his eyes and I looked into his blue eyes and it was like all I could see was like him, like purely him, like his authentic self, which is what I believe we all are. Once these blocks of self are removed, like that is who we are authentically. And that's what I saw in my dad. And I was able to love him like that. And we were able to have some like really genuine experiences and that I will never, I'll never forget. And I would have never been able to do that or face that or have faith that God would be there to support me through that fear and that I could use this experience to help someone else if I hadn't had been practicing the stuff that was taught to me, right? And I had this like it was in one of the last days I was there and I had a really profound experience and I was in the hospice and a lady had offered to do like a spiritual treatment thing on me and I had a meditation during it and it was quite interesting because I saw my dad as an adult version and me but he was like his highest self, like his most authentic self. And we were sitting on these two blue chairs, these teal chairs on the top of a hill. And, we were talking and it was like we were talking as like the true, like authentic version of ourselves, our highest selves. And like I said to him, like, Dad, like it's time like for us to leave each other now. And in like I'm emotional now, but in that moment it wasn't emotional. It was like it was very like to the fact and like we both understood. And like he was like, "You're right, sweetie, like it is." And so he got up off the chair and he started to walk. And as he was like walking into the distance, he turned into a little boy and he was like further and further in the distance and I could see every little detail about him, like his freckles and his sun-kissed hair and his pure blue eyes. And he was wearing bare feet and a white shirt, shorts, and he just had like pure joy. And I knew in that moment that was really who he was, right? And so I had to make a hard decision and I had to, think about myself and I realized that my dad being an untreated alcoholic like hadn't grown up emotionally, which is what I believe emotional sobriety is, like growing up, right? And so I knew in my heart, because I saw it when I looked at him, that he loved me with all of his heart and he wanted the best for me. And, in a moment of revelation, I thought, you know what? If I'm operating on that belief, then what's best for me is for me to actually go home and to, you know, work my primary purpose, which is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So, I left and my dad didn't know, my dad didn't know it, but it was like I was on my way to the airport and just like this smile came over my face and like I had like tears in my eyes and I was like, Dad, like you don't know this, but I'm doing what you want, right? And it was such a cool experience. And like I find with this program, um, if I stay motivated and and I continue to practice the principles, like I have a deep and effective connection with God. And as a result of that, my life is completely changed, right? And people are placed in my path that I know are meant to be in my path that that I can share experience with. And um, it's just brought like so many gifts that I didn't even know were possible. And, you know, I spent years and years and years of trying to get sober based on self-knowledge in whatever way that was, like therapy, treatment, this, that, the other thing. And like years, like a decade, right? And like they say in like the spiritual experience, the very back of the book, I can find it. Yeah. So on 567, what often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. And that's been my experience. You know, I spent 10 years trying to do this on my own. And then I actually decided to do this work as laid out in this book. And things have happened that I cannot explain. Like I really cannot explain. And I call Bill sometimes when I have these experiences because I know he's the only one. Well, I feel like he's the only one that understands because you can't explain God, right? Like, and so I'll call him and I'm like, oh my God, like blah, 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 blah. And he's just kind of like, yeah, yeah. And I'm like, do you get it? And he's like, sort of, but like, I know what you mean, right? And those are the kind of experiences that I've had. And I know that, you know, in order to stay sober, like I have to stay on that spiritual beam. I have to practice steps 10, 11, and 12, and I have to work with others. Um, and those are the things that I come back to. And those are the things that have brought me spiritual growth and a real effective spiritual experience in this program. And, you know, I've had, you know, there were certain things that was working on for years in therapy. And like, I'm not saying that outside help doesn't have its place, but by working this program, like some of those things, like just were gone. And I was like, what the heck? I just spent 7 years talking about this with my therapist, and that was just gone, right? And so, yeah, I mean, if my experience like can inspire anybody to, you know, really take that leap. And I think, you know, if you're here, you want that deeper experience. Like it really, really works. And thank God, like literally thank God for you know, the people that came before me that really dug into this and took this back to, you know, the purest version that I believe, you know, it was in the start when it was written, because there's so much power in this book, and it's changed my life. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. So just to recap what Katie's talking about in her experiences. You can't really articulate the experience of what this is, right? Like when she calls me and she talks to me about what's happening, I just know that she doesn't know how to explain it, because you can't explain God. God isn't able to be explained. The experiences that we have through what she was talking about, they're unexplainable. That's why I do this, because I want everybody to have what she just described to the best of her ability, because through that, you will never drink again. And I often talk about the God dope, right? That's the fucking dope right there. That's what we've all been looking for in sex, in pornography, in gambling, in the drugs and the booze that we did. We're looking for that. And the other point I'd like to highlight is digging into this for the first fucking couple, 2-3 years and really making this like a something important in your life, the most important thing, will change the rest of your life. But if you just bring in pieces of it, of what you think you should bring in, and you separate this from life, it takes a long fucking time. A whole lifetime geared to self-centeredness doesn't get set in reverse at once. Whereas, you know, and I don't want to put her on a pedestal, but she is able to put self aside, or at least be conscious of fucking looking for it constantly. And that's what my big book studies, and Gord and I, that's what we're trying to bring. And we're only on step 2. And as we get into this literature tonight, it starts talking about what I'm talking about. So in step 3, we're going to look at the prayer, really. We're going to look at the actor, but the prayer, relieve me of the bondage of self. Rebuild with me, do with me as thou wilt. What does that even fucking mean? Like, we've all read it hundreds of times. What does it mean? It means fucking destruction and rebuild of yourself. It means abandon yourself to God. How do you do that? You don't do it because you just guess what your God's will is. There's a process. And if you follow the process, it's in step 10, understanding step 6. Things fucking change. The only problem with doing what I'm talking about, you don't get what you want. Like the number of times she called me and she didn't get what she want, and the pain was fucking pure and real. And I would be like, what are you doing? She's like, doing those things. I said, keep doing it. Just keep doing it. Because I knew she was doing the things. And I knew that it would let off, right? Because the beatings really do continue till the lessons learned. And if she would have fucking bailed on what she was doing, she would have been beaten up some more. She would have been suffering, and really she probably would have drank. But she had enough belief and faith in myself and her sponsor, and, you know, and she didn't know yet though. She hadn't earned the right to speak what she spoke today because she didn't go through what she needed to go through to earn the right. And as she earned the right, she can now speak on it. And because she can speak on it and does it, she's like, and by no means are we ever free and clear. She's over the hump. Humility is in her, and it is a desire to seek and do God's will. It's a desire to see where I'm fucking wrong. No more blame. It's a desire to serve. No more self. And yeah, we're going to fuck it up here and there, but you know, and then that's the gift, man. This is where the fellowship of the Spirit lives. And as we get into the 3 and the 4 and the 5, my favorite step, most important step, is step 6. Step 6 will probably take us 3 or 4 fucking sessions, because I want you guys, or whoever is here, to understand the depth of self. If you can understand self, suffering isn't like it was. It'll be beautiful suffering, and it's much different. And then you'll see the difference between 6 and 7. And if you don't experience what I'm saying, you'll never see the difference between 6 and 7. They're totally different steps. But if you understand what I'm saying and you practically apply it through a 10, then you will fucking be like, wow, 6 is so much different from 7. I want to live in 7. But you won't know that unless you experience it. But you got to earn the right, and earning the right means fucking going through the pain and not getting what you want. And through that, you know, life gets real good. You want to add anything?
No, just for the guys that are in the pen tonight. I mean, to add to that little bit, I never once ended up in jail because I was doing God's will. I never once ended up in jail just because I was getting high. I always ended up in jail because I was doing stupid shit and I was acting out in self. And when I stopped acting out in self, my life started exponentially getting better. And there's hope. There's hope. I know you're independent. It sucks. But you don't have to ever go back there again. Ever. I don't have to go back there. I fucking love that. All right, that's it.
Okay, we're going to start on page 47. We're going to hit the middle of the page. We'll go for a little bit and then we'll take our break. I have my doubts that we're going to get through this whole chapter, but let's give it a try.
We needed to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he is on his way. Who is we in that scenario? It's all of us when we sponsor guys, right? When we take guys through the step and we get to this point and he starts to have these beliefs in what he's believing in, we emphatically assure him that he's on the way. We get super happy for this guy or girl, excuse me. We get super happy. We never judge. We never try and put down what their belief is. I tried the Buddhist route for a while too. And although nobody emphatically told me I was on the right path, it was enough for me to make a start, right? So when we sponsor people, we assure them that they're on the right way, on the right path. It's been repeatedly proven among us. Upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Does everybody here know what a cornerstone is in construction? Yeah, you do. If you don't, I'm going to tell you very quickly. If you are laying a path on a floor, you have to start with the corner piece, and you can build out this way off of it, and you can build out this way off of this. If this is set properly, you will be level and true both ways in any direction if you set this properly. And that's what it's talking about here. Your recovery, your foundation, your life designed for living can be true if this cornerstone is a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built, if it's set in place properly. And that's why we emphatically assure people that they're on the right path, because they've begun the path. This was great news to us, for we had assumed we could not make use of spiritual principles unless we accepted many things on faith, which seemed difficult to believe. When people presented us with spiritual approaches, how frequently do we all say, I wish I had what that man has? I'm sure it would work if I could only believe as he believes. But I cannot accept as surely true the many articles of faith which are so plain to him. So it was comforting to learn that we could commence at a simpler level. It was very comforting to me that with a little bit of willingness, I could still maybe get this thing. You know, it didn't have to be your God or your belief or your spirit rituals, right? It could be mine. And I could start this journey as simply as I needed to. And that was a huge, huge difference for me. That was a huge thing when Bill sat me in his truck and said, it doesn't have to be anything. It just has to be. And besides a seeming inability to accept much on faith, which, by the way, was very difficult for me. How about you guys? Was that difficult to buy into faith? Is anyone struggling with faith? I did. I don't see many people admitting it, but I did. I struggle with faith brutally. And when I came to terms with it at this point in recovery, at this point when I was first going through this book, I didn't know. All I knew was what had been taught to me in the past. And I knew that I didn't like that. And that didn't work for me. So it was very hard. But I also knew very, very seriously that I needed to buy into something, because what I'd done my whole life had failed me miserably. And that pain was great. And I believe that my sponsor had a God that helped him. I believed that some of the people, you know, in the meetings that I listened to had something that made them happy. I believed that. And that was enough for me to start this path with a bit of blind faith, if you will. That gave me hope. Because at this point, really, it's all about the hope, right? At this point in the journey, it's about hope. So that faith was blind. I just did it because I had to. We often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice. Like there's no way. Who said to themselves or in a meeting or wherever, I'm not buying into this thing. The God word makes me sick to my stomach. It raises the hairs on my neck and on my arms. I can't do this. Anyone? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. Hey? Obstinacy. Because we've learned something that we don't like. And however we learned it, we didn't like either. And probably more importantly, how we were taught it, we didn't like. Right? So we stayed away from it for years. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual, here we go, this is exactly what I'm talking about, even casual reference to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. This sort of thinking had to be abandoned. Why did it have to be abandoned? Oh, because I was going to die. Plain and simple, that's it. I was going to die. Though some of us resisted, we found no great difficulty in casting aside such feelings. Faced with alcoholic destruction, or I was going to die, we soon became as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. Katie talked about this, right? Over and over again, she tried to figure things out on her own. And over again, she found out that it didn't work until finally she was in so much pain that she had to try it this way, right? I mean, that's exactly what she just spoke about. That's exactly what I've experienced in my life. 27 years for me in and out of these rooms, in and out of, but never ever doing this, you know, always trying to do it my way on self-knowledge and whatever I thought was right, which was always wrong. The reader may still ask why he should believe in a power greater than himself. I think at this point it's pretty obvious, but yeah, I continued to ask that. We think there are good reasons. Let us have a look at some of them. The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it's impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption at a starting point. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed as mankind studies the material world that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. Now, I love this next illustration. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. So we know that there's electrons and protons and neutrons, and they spin around at this furious rate, right? And science was taught to me out of a book in junior high or I don't know, somewhere along the line. Probably wasn't high school because I wasn't there anymore. But somewhere along the line, someone taught me that, and I believed it. I believed that, you know, in this, there's electrons and protons and neutrons spinning around at such a speed that it creates a solid, right? Have we all heard that? Right? Seems a little far-fetched, don't you think? Seems pretty far-fetched to me. But because some book told me and a teacher told me, I believed it. Why is it so hard for me to believe in God? Anyway, we'll get on to that in a second. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful guiding creative intelligence, right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we work very hard to set out to convince ourselves that that isn't so. I work very, very hard when you tell me there's a God, a creator, to prove that that's not true. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. The great boom, the big boom, or whatever you call that. You know, Big Bang Theory. Thank you. Yeah, the big boom. The big, it was probably a boom, but it's called the Big Bang. Thank you, Amanda.
Oh, pretty nice.
We believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. So imagine if the Big Bang Theory is absolutely true, that means that our life means nothing. That we are going nowhere, and our purpose on this planet in the short 100-year span that we are all on. Think about this. Right now, you are on this planet, and in 100 years, not a single person that's involved in this planet will be here. They're all going to be completely different people. And if there is no God, that means it was meant for nothing. And it just continues to happen for absolutely no reason. I'm sorry, I don't know about you guys, but I just do not want to believe that shit. I just can't buy that. I don't help people just to stay sober anymore. I did for a while, and we'll talk about that weeks later. But I help people because it's what I do today, and there's a purpose for it. I know there's an underlying reason for it. I don't know why, but I know that it's putting it out into the universe, and I know that energy needs to flow. I can't buy into we're just born and die. Can we all agree that that sucks? Yeah. And yet, for years, I would have myself believe that. No wonder I wasn't ever happy. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, Gord, 007, agent of God. Spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word. You know, got the last word in the argument. The Alpha and the Omega, the all-powerful. I'm the all-powerful. No. I've proven that that's failed. The beginning and the end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? You want to stop there, Bill?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to go back to where Gord started. I want to touch base only on a couple things through what he's read. We need to ask ourselves where he started. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say he does believe or he is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. When I sponsor, that's where I give a guy step 2. Of course, I finished the chapter, but this is where I ask him, do you believe in God or are you willing to believe in God? If he says yes to either one of those, fuck, we're good to go. Why? Because the book is lack of power is my dilemma. I need to find a power greater than myself that will solve my problem, obviously. But where and how am I to find this power? Well, that's exactly what the book is about. Enables me to find the power that will solve my problem. When I first get here, I think I got a drug and alcohol problem, which is true. And if you follow it and you get that first spiritual awakening like Katie was talking about, you're probably not going to drink anymore. But if you don't perfect and enlarge your spiritual life and find, me and my bro G were talking earlier, the second bottom of self. If you don't find the bottom of self and fucking enlarge your spiritual life through that process, you will probably drink again, or you will suffer a lot being sober. So as we keep going, it has been repeatedly proven among us that upon the simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure, what? Could be built. Doesn't say that it's built because you believe in God. It says it could be built. Gord described the cornerstone, and if there's another definition in the dictionary that says, of which all things are built from. All things are built from a cornerstone of God, of higher power, of whatever the hell you want to call it. That's where it's built from. But it doesn't just get built from that because you believe that God exists or that you believe in God. Because unless you learn how to abandon yourself to God, then God really stays very theoretical. And if God's a theory, then there's a lot of suffering and there's a lot of relapse in the theory of God. And when we get to step 3, okay, so I'm going to backtrack a bit. So I would be in meetings and I would watch people, go to the podium. I've said it before on a Wednesday and like, oh, me and God are fucking 6 months sober. I'm fucking 1 year sober. And then on Friday, they're like, fuck, I drank. I'm like, how the hell? I swear you and God were fucking best friends on Wednesday. And now you're not and you're drunk? How? And I would see that over and over and over and over. And then I was like, fuck, the ego is really powerful, right? The ego, part of the disease that we suffer from is validation. We want to be accepted. That's why the social and emotional instinct of the instinct is probably the biggest one that we fucking cling to. We'll get to the instincts later in step 4 and 6. But the emotional security is the biggest instinct. And so my ego always wants to be accepted and validated. And when I look through my sex conduct and my 4 and my resentments, it's typically because I didn't get validated or you didn't understand me or whatever it was, right? So that's a big thing. So I was like, I think that the person who was at the podium on Wednesday, I think they were just using God as an effective mental defense and God's not actually working in their life. It's an idea that sounds good. It sounds like that warm, fuzzy pillow that you can cuddle up to and it fucking soaks up your fucking tears, right? But it's true. You can fucking find solace in a pillow. Oh, fuck. That's what the big book does. It's warm. It's fuzzy. That's what the Bible can do. Makes me feel fucking philosophically comforted. Makes me feel really good and warm and fuzzy as I wallow in emotionalism. But that won't keep you sober and that won't give you the good life. And that's theoretical. So back to the step 3 part. It talked about first, we had to quit playing God. It doesn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be the director. I am his agent. He is the father. I am his child. This was the concept that we've walked through the new and triumphant arch to freedom. It's saying right in step 3, if this is a concept, it's a concept that if I do it right, if this idea is done right, I can walk through this archway to fucking freedom. Freedom from what? Abandoning myself to God. Abandoning myself, selfishness, self-centeredness, self-centered fear, the things that I want, I can abandon those things and walk through this archway to freedom. But if it's only a concept. But then on the very next page, it says, when we sincerely took such a position, sincerely, the basis of sincerely is honestly. When I honestly took the position that God is now my new employer, I fucking work for God now. How do I sincerely take the position? It's not that I just want to do God's will. I have to identify my will. Through the relinquishment of my will and not getting what I want, suffering the pains, I will find God's will. And so instead of you going into recovery and just trying to enforce these principles into your life, oh, I got to be kind today. Oh, I'm going to be kind. Oh, I'm going to be honest. Fuck, I'm supposed to be honest right now. Oh, now I'm going to be honest. And then I become honest or whatever it is. I can self-will all the principles I want into this program. The problem with me doing that, it's based in self. To be willing to work for humility takes most of us a long fucking time. But if I am willing to work for humility, it can take a short time. How do I take the short route? I do a step 10 and I follow exactly what it says. I watch for these things when they crop up. I ask God to remove it right now. I talk to somebody immediately. I make my amends quickly if I have harmed anyone, and I resolutely turn my thoughts to someone I can help. Resolutely, in an admirably purposeful, determined, unwavering manner is what that means. And remember, way back in step 4, or I guess ahead in step 4, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. I am only to resolutely look for my mistakes on my journey of life, of self. Resolutely, in an admirably purposeful, determined, and unwavering manner, I am constantly taking my own inventory. But we don't want to keep taking inventory because it's a pain in the ass. Why should I drearily rehearse the days of omission and commission? Talks about it in step 10 and 12 and 12. Why? Why do we take so much inventory and put emphasis on it? Because after we get good at it, it makes the rest of my life fucking great. It talks about. That's why we do that. Skidmore, hold on.
Wait for the mic. Thanks, Katie.
So we use the word humility so much. I know for me, when I first come in, I didn't know what humility meant. I just heard it.
Didn't know what man?
Humility.
Okay.
The actual definition of it.
Yeah.
It's the accurate interpretation of oneself. So meaning I don't look at myself better than any other human being, which keeps me humble. It is the actual definition of humility. So if anyone that's wondering, that's just really what the basis of what it is. I'm not above you. I'm not below you. We are even keel. We're all equal.
True. Okay. I'm going to give you another definition. The definition of humility, as Bill W. describes it in step 7, a desire to seek and do God's will, but it was missing. The word humility is often intensely disliked and misunderstood, he writes. And I always think about that. What does he mean when he says the word humility is often intensely disliked and often misunderstood? I go to a 3-step discussion meeting. You're going to find out at a 3-step discussion meeting because humility always goes on the board. And you're going to hear it being fully misunderstood. People are going to come up with all sorts of definitions. And then you're going to find out why the word's intensely disliked. Because people attribute humility with fucking humiliation. Yeah. So both those things that he writes makes good sense. But as you read the step 7 literature, he talks about humility in 2 fashions, okay? He talks about it in fucking pain and trying to change. And through the pain and the change and not getting what we want, we find this desire to seek and do God's will. So you're right. as we go through the process of inventory, we're looking at ourselves critically always. And it's about looking at who and what we really fucking are, with a sincere attempt to become who we could be, right? So I appreciate you saying that. And it is true, but it's also, in my view, partially not true, because it doesn't have the main basis of the desire to seek and do God's will.
Naturally.
And that's the biggest difference through what Katie was up here describing and what had happened to her. Something happened through the pain where it shifts, and it talks about that in step 7. I can't wait to do step 7. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think
Eat that thing.
when I first came in, I think I really like focused on like knowing the book, and I think that that is super, super important that we like that I understand what the book is saying. But I almost like I wasn't practicing what the book was saying, right? I wasn't having the experiences that I needed to deepen my connection with God. And I was using it as a means of like getting worth and value, right? And like how can I share on this so that this person thinks that I'm spiritually fit, or right? And so I think that like it is a journey, and I don't regret the fact that I went through that portion, because like I did need to understand it. But I'm a school teacher, and so like hearing people talk about the book as being experiential, like I always describe it as like if I have a group of kids and I'm standing at the front of the class and I'm just like telling them about something or other, like they're not gonna really, it's not really going to sink in. But until they, like, say I take them out of the class on a field trip and we look at the thing and we study it and there's an action that we have to take, then they start to understand it, right? And that's how the book has been for me. I've had to take the actions through steps 4 through 12, and then the continuous action in 10 through 12 to have the experiences with God. And then as I continue to do that, my connection with God grows. And then the humility grows, because I know what it's like to be in pain and then to get out of pain, right? And to surrender it to God, and then the pain to leave. So yeah, that's just my experience.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Katie. And then, so back to this little piece, the simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. So it can be built. Doesn't say that it is built. And why I brought step 3 into this paragraph was because step 3 is the beginning of learning of how to fix the cornerstone in place. The cornerstone gets fixed through circumstances. Every moment that life presents with you is an opportunity to fix the cornerstone in place. But if you're not willing or you're not awake to fix the cornerstone in place, see where you're selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, where you're being judgmental, whatever, then that opportunity passes you by and you don't learn the lesson. But the beatings continue till the lesson is learned. And so how the cornerstone gets fixed in place is through moment by moment by moment, being aware. That's why step 10 is so important, because it's an awareness step of what's happening right fucking now. It's not about nightly inventory, and it's not about promptly admitting that you're wrong. It's what's happening right now. Boom, I'm in judgment. Oh, fuck, God. Can you please take this away? Fuck, I need to step outside. I'm judging the fuck out of this guy. Okay, my sponsor tells me to go back to God and okay, keep praying. But for a week straight, I keep judging this guy. And for 2 weeks straight, I'm still judging him. Okay, that doesn't matter. You follow the process regardless of if you think it's working. Because through the ritual of the process, ritual, and the word ritual means a ceremony that's done over and over and over, you will change. And that's what it takes. That's why the processes in the book are so important. Then the wonderfully effective spiritual structure gets built. Now back to the foundation of this structure. Step one is the foundation principle of this whole program, really. Humility is, but let's say step one. Humility, honesty is step one principle. If you ain't honest, this fucking stairway you're building or this building you're building is fucking crooked. So that cornerstone you're fixing in place that Gord said squares everything up, it's so you can build it fucking straight. This wonderfully effective spiritual structure gets built straight because you got 90s and 90s as your cornerstones, and then you can put the bricks on and build this thing up, and then it's solid and it doesn't fall over. But if you're not honest, then this fucking whole thing is crooked.
And
And
now
the-
you see why I use the word true, right? True. Deep in my heart, I became true, building off of that foundation. Straight. It's the same. It's a play on words, and Bill was really good at that. I like to do it once in a while myself.
And it can be true, but it ain't true by fucking you. Because you have the ability to rationalize and justify the most errant bullshit to suit every action and inaction in your life, just like me. Which is why the step 10 process allows me to talk to somebody else. Because I can't see self with self. And through my own best objective view, I still will not see self. So through the process of a 10, I'm always bouncing my life and my selfishness off somebody else so I can get recalibrated. The problem with me doing that is I'm going to hear shit I don't want to fucking hear constantly. And when I started the session up today, I'm like, listen for the things that are going to hit you, that's going to piss you off, that I'm going to say today or Gord's going to say. Because that's the exact same things that a sponsor is going to do or a good God-centered 12-step pillar. But if I go to my mom and I get that same advice, she's like, oh no, Bill, you're going to be okay. You know, just keep it up. Keep it up. You'll be okay.
Meeting
Mom.
makers make it.
It ain't going to fucking be okay. It ain't going to be okay. So we got to do things that are different, and we got to be able to take that criticism from somebody who cares more about our lives and our feelings and our well-being. And if you have multiple good God-centered 12-step pillars, not just people in the program, okay? Lots of people in Tradition 3 Fellowship, they're going to give you bunk advice. They might give you the best of intention advice, but God-centered 12-step people, have 5 of them. Bounce that idea off of all 5 of them and see what all 5 say. And then make your decision. You can still make your decision based on self. Go ahead. But at least you got 5 people to like put it against when you fuck it up and you make some blunders in your life. What the fuck was that?
Sounded like a dog to me.
Dave? Okay.
I had a joke, but I'm gonna leave that. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I want to add here is, and I've said it before, you can live your life with the best of intention, but selfish motives are all over under that. And if you're suffering in your recovery and you think that you're really trying to do the best recovery you can, it's probably because you're running on the best of intention, but your motives are all still based in self. And you can't see it. Why? Probably because you're not using a process of 10. You're not using God-centered 12-step pillars, and you're making your own decisions. You're running your life, probably. That's probably why. Yeah, the road of hell is paved with good intentions.
But Bill keeps talking about bringing third step into this. And the reason I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe is he's saying that effective spiritual structure can be built. And that starts to happen when we get a proper step 3, making a decision It's basically putting pen to paper. You're starting 4 and 5, 6 and 7, 8 and 9. That's where we start learning how to combat self, or how to allow God to combat self for us. Right.
And the key word she said is that's where we begin learning. Step 3 is not the fucking thing that you hear in the rooms, that it's the deal. Step 3 is not the fucking deal. Step 7 is the deal. Step 7 is worked in the 10, and 10 will bring you to the understanding of 7. 10 is mostly step 6 when you start it, because there's so much fucking pain. As you work a beginning part of a 10, there's always fucking pain because you're constantly fighting against self. But eventually it becomes a working part of your mind and you come to rely upon it. So then 10 really turns into like a 7. But when that happens, you're living this shit and you're not struggling. You're probably a very good service. You're identifying selfishness all the time, the best that you can,
But
and you're
most-
following the processes.
Yeah, but most important, we rely on God to remove it from us and put us in the right path.
Okay. The other couple things before we go to break. We often have found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitiveness, unreasoning prejudice. So the context in which that is top of 48. The context of what that is to try to believe in God. You may not believe in God because you might find yourself handicapped by obstinacy, which is stubbornness, sensitiveness, which is pride, and unreasoning prejudice, which is you're judging something you don't know anything about. You're already preconceived judgment of something, what you think it is, but you don't know because it's contempt prior to investigation. You've never investigated it, but you're judging it. So minus the God part, those 3 things are still the biggest blocks to your open-mindedness. Your unreasoning prejudice, handicapped by obstinacy, and your sensitiveness will still be the biggest blocks, and it will handicap your recovery. So that's also to be noted in any given situation, in any area of your life period. Those are going to be your biggest blocks also. Now, just down to all the way down to 49, middle of 49, where Gord finished off. So we went through all of the other readings. Then we get to this middle paragraph. Instead of regarding yourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever advancing creation. Does anyone know what that line means? Okay. Intelligent agents in 1935-39, and meant collectors of information. That's what it meant, okay? So instead of regarding ourselves as people who collect information, to be what? Spearheads of God's ever advancing creation. Basically what it's saying is take the information that you learn in life. Take the information that you learn in the meetings. That's what my big book study is all about. I've taken the information through sponsorship, through meetings, through fucking all other sorts of recovery modalities. And I take it and I collect it. And I see the guy on Wednesday and I see him on Friday. And I take that data and I see this and I see that and I see that. And at the first couple of years, I judged a lot of it. I judged a lot of what people were doing, maybe 4 or 5 years in too. But as I practiced like the step 10 and I was asking for it to be removed, there got to a point where I was just like observing. Do whatever the fuck you want. I'm going to observe you and I'm going to take this data for one reason. So I can be a spearhead, the head of the spear, the pointy part of spear. And if God is love, then I'm the fucking point of love. I'm trying to fucking help you understand something, but my fucking intention is love, and I'm trying to bring this into the world in a good way. And a lot of people, Tommy and I were talking, over the years, there's been a lot of people that have not liked me or my approach, what I do, how I say it, and how I do it. That's totally fine. Why? Because humility is within the beholder. I know why I do what I do. I dedicate my whole life to fucking doing this shit, whether it's here or soon as this is done. My phone doesn't stop ringing. I'm not here to fucking like pat myself on the back. But humility lies within the beholder. So it doesn't really matter what anybody thinks about me or about you guys. If you guys are trying your best, whether you're in self and you're doing it with the best of intention and you don't understand motive yet, that's fine. But if you're just trying and you're trying to fucking be the best that you can be, this fucking stuff we're talking about, I believe will come to you. And you will find that other level of humility and you will find that freedom. But it doesn't come just because you want it. It comes through personal inventory, prayer. And I loved what Katie talked about in meditation. That meditation she had spoke God all in it. And I bet you if I asked her, she probably couldn't meditate for the first fucking 8 years of her recovery. Correct? Yeah. Because you can't meditate properly if you're all blocked up with fucking shit. And sitting there quietly with your eyes closed and your brain's fucking screaming isn't meditating. Right? Whacking off in the shower isn't meditating. Right?
Man.
Gord, no. So, like, instead of regarding yourselves as intelligent agents, collect the information. Try not to judge people, but collect the information and use it to be a spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation. Try to, if God is love, then you're always trying to bring like something good into the world constantly, right? And I think that's what I do as a sponsor. I try to turn people into spearheads. And like, I'm going to use Amanda. Her and I are working together right now. She told me I want to help women. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, okay, let's fucking do it, right? And she's been struggling for a few years in and out. And I don't know if I have the answer, but if she follows my lead and follows what I'm doing, which she has been like to a fucking T, I have no doubt that in like a year or 2 or 3, you'll see a person that you're just like, wow. But I don't want to put that pressure on her either, right? Like I just did. But that's the hope, right? And that's what I see constantly. But it comes from abandoning yourself to God, as if you understand God, admitting you're false to him and your fellows, clearing away the wreckage of the past, and then giving freely. Then you can join us in this fellowship of the Spirit. Go ahead, Aaron.
When you get the mic. Thanks.
So, like to sum it up, instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, so it's just people who collect information. So that's kind of what we're trying to do: collect the information, give it to somebody else to try to help. Like,
Yeah.
is that kind of what you said, Bill? Like,
Yeah,
like
exactly. Collect your information through your own journey.
yes.
Collect the information from other people's journey. Compile it all for a good reason.
Thank
Not
you.
to judge, right? And as I work with somebody, when I get them to step 6, I'm like, I want you to watch people. This is a thing I do. I want my person, let's say it's Amanda, at some point, I'm going to be like, I want you to watch people. Not from a judgmental point of view, from an observational point of view. You can observe and have no judgment in it. And that's okay, right? And if she does have judgment in it, then she'll know what to do. There's a process. But you'll get to a point, and Richie Callahan's there right here, and he fucking does this really well. He doesn't judge people. He observes people. But I know his past, and he probably judged fucking everybody, right? But he doesn't today. And he's on a different plane, right? And his whole life is dedicated to service too. A guy who spent time in prison and blah, 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 and was a fucking hellion. But he's had that change too. And his came differently in a way, but doesn't matter. He got it, right? So yeah, take data, man, collect data and follow the processes, and then use the data to make the world a better place. And that's what we try to do up here. And hopefully we all try to do. And we do that in the meetings, right? So don't be afraid at a meeting to share the fucking truth, right? And if your truth is different than 90% of the room's truth, that's fucking okay.
That's okay.
Don't be afraid. to tell the truth of whatever it is, but always be open-minded to know that your truth may change. Because the journey of truth is the journey to find out who you are, of love for yourself. But being open-minded along the journey is like, okay, I made a mistake. Okay, I need to own amend, or I need to change my approach or my behavior or what I did, and always be open-minded that the journey of truth has to have an open mind, or you won't find out who you are. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, well, it's almost 8:35. Let's take a 10-minute break. Does that work?
We'll get back to the podcast in a second. The opinions expressed on this podcast are solely of the guest sharing or myself. We have no affiliation with any 12-step or recovery program. And if you do like our work, please consider visiting BILLWARDLIFE and supporting what we do. Now back to the podcast.
Okay, we're going to get rocking and rolling here. We're going to start right where Gord ended, and I will continue reading.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We who have traveled this dubious path beg of you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of faith may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability and happiness, usefulness, in which we should have sought ourselves. What that's saying is, don't judge other people and religions because they're given a lot of purpose to people. And I used to cynically dissect religious people and beliefs, and I started teaching my kids that. It wasn't until I was 3 years sober where I started seeing, holy shit, I really infected my kids with some really bad beliefs. And then, you know, since it has reversed itself because of the program, but next page. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes their shortcomings as the basis of wholesale condemnation. And I'm going to use myself in this right now. So a lot of people will see the defect in me, or they look at me as arrogant or whatever the fuck it is. That's fine. And then they judge me in a basis of wholesale condemnation. And once they got to know me, they realized that I'm actually not like that. And I'm quite different. And I have done the same thing with many people. What I learned over the years of coming into recovery is when I do that, when I let those resentments set in, I got to go talk to the person who I'm judging. And like 99% of the time, the resentment and the judgment have gone away because I actually got to know them a little bit. But we, you know, it's kind of still part of our nature, right? I can still do it. We can all still do it, I'm sure. We talked of intolerance while we were intolerant ourselves. You know, I talk of intolerance, but then over here, I'm doing the same kind of thing. We miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. Has anyone here listened to my old Big Book studies or my podcast and heard me talk about the story about where I talk about the guy with no legs in the wheelchair? So I made up this story and it just came to me. It was kind of like a creation story that came to me. But it was about this guy, and it was actually just up this road here, and it was a fake story where I talk about this guy in a wheelchair who every time I would walk to work, I would see this guy in like a doorway, and he was homeless, and I would see him and I would cross the street, and I never wanted to talk to this guy. And I spent 2 years avoiding this guy, but I had to walk down the street every fucking day. And I would always see homeless people around this guy, and I wanted nothing to do with these homeless guys or this guy in the wheelchair. And I just figured they were going to ask me for money and blah, blah, blah. And then one day I didn't see him. I'm kind of looking for him and I don't see the guy. And so I walk down the road where I normally wouldn't walk because there he is. And then as I'm walking by the doorway, he rolls himself out and I'm like, oh, fuck, this guy. And then he starts talking to me and I start talking to him. And then I find out that this guy used to be an engineer, that he used to have a wife. He came to Canada with no money or nothing. And him and his wife built a good life, a humble life. And then his wife got, you know, cancer or some illness and she died. And he spent all of his money trying to help her and he ended up being homeless. And so every time I used to see him panhandling, I thought that he was panhandling to get money for booze or drugs, but he was actually panhandling to get money for food that he could give to the other homeless guys. And I learned a whole lot about this guy in the half an hour that I had a talk with him outside of this doorstep, this doorway. And I missed the beauty of this man because the ugliness of some of the trees of what I thought was ugly, but it actually wasn't ugly. It was beautiful. So that's part of our open-mindedness. That's part of that obstinacy, sensitiveness, and unreasoning prejudice that'll keep us trapped in our own minds. So, you know, try to, you know, the observation part and giving everybody a chance, right? And like, for me, again, I'll use myself. A lot of people don't like me and but I will still say hi to everybody. Even if a sponsee fires me, he calls me a fucking asshole. With tact and common sense, I'm always going to say hi to the guy, right? And I think through that, I free myself from the bondage of self, right? And in meetings, when I don't like a message, years ago when I was like Tommy says, fuck, I liked you better when you were just a fucking asshole. But I'm not quite like that anymore because I've changed a lot and I don't judge a lot of like people anymore like I used to. And as I judged them, I was still trying to work the program as best that I could. And that's why I say wherever you're at, keep trying to do it because you'll change. I know I've changed and I continue to change and maybe I'll change even more. I know my daughters say that I've changed a lot in the last year or so. So fuck, it's just never ending fucking thing, right? We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing. In our personal stories, keep note of what it says here. In our personal stories, you will find wide variations of the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself. Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. So the stories in the back of the book, the teller approaches and conceives the power which is greater than himself. The stories in the back of the book aren't about how these guys got sober. The stories in the back of the book are how they built a relationship with their higher power. In symptom, they quit drinking. They never needed to drink. And that's really what the book is about. A lot of people think AA is about, or CA or the big book or whatever, is a religious program, that it's about God. But I think part of us being spearheads is to practice these principles in all of our affairs. And a much more important demonstration of these principles lies before us on our respective homes, occupation, and all of our affairs. I've attracted many people that were not alcoholic, that were just normal, that just wanted what I had because it's attractive to be kind and considerate and understanding and helpful. And people are like, how do you be like that? Well, the program of the big book taught me. And then we can help other people understand, right? Guide them to Al-Anon, guide them wherever, right? One proposition, however, these men and women strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than themselves. This power in each case has accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible, as the celebrated American statesman put it. Let's look at the record. I fucking love this. Here are thousands, now it's millions of men and women, worldly indeed. Anyone know what worldly means?
Non-spiritual.
Non-spiritual. That's what worldly meant back then. I ask a lot of people, well, the book was written when the war was on, right? The Great Depression. So it was like, there wasn't a lot of world traveling around. So it's not like worldly, We weren't traveling the world. No one was. Just bombs. Here are thousands of men and women, non-spiritual indeed, just like us. We were. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude towards that power. And the attitude can't be taken unless the processes are followed. And to do certain simple things, the processes. There has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. Notice how Bill W. wrote living and thinking? He didn't say thinking and living, because we act and live our way into the change of thinking through the simple things and the processes. Even if it's only a millimeter by millimeter at a time, the process never changes. And we live our way into the thinking. And it says revolutionary. Like that's a full upheaval and full change on how you view life. In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. When did this happen? Well, it happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. When we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. Having a new employer, being all powerful, he necessarily provides what we need if we stay close to him and perform his work well. How do we stay close to him? Identifying the defects in us that aren't him, relinquishing that, and he reveals himself to us more. But where does this happen? Typically, it happens in the face of collapse and despair. It happens for me when I burnt down my life. So some of you guys don't know, but I built $1 million company and I had a big house in Chestermere on an acreage and I had Escalades and trucks and my wife and kids were well taken care of financially and so was I. And then I got on the pipe and I fucking 6 years, I destroyed my life. And I wanted to put a gun in my head and blow my brains out. And, but in the face of collapse and despair, total failure of my human resources, my own self, I found this new power, peace, sense of happiness and direction flowed into me. Once I came here, I was broken and beaten, and I did a few simple things. I met these simple requirements, and I haven't stopped. And because of that, my life's really, really good today. I was messaging a woman I used to know, a good friend of mine, knew her 10, 15 years ago. I used to visit her at her house in Ogden, and she found me on Facebook yesterday, and she lives in fucking Mexico. She's like, oh, I was talking to this lady, and your name came up, and I really wanted to see how you're doing. How are you doing? And I mentioned, yeah, you know, fucking burnt my life down, destroyed my family, fucking wanted to kill myself, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, I'm really sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry. It's the best fucking thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
In that face of collapse and despair, I found this new freedom, peace, and sense of happiness flow into me after I met these requirements and I did them. In recovery, that's also happened. But that's the path, right? This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements. Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence. I was confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence when I was 14, before I started doing drugs. And I was like, what the fuck's the point of life anyway? I remember 14, 15 years old going, what's the point? And then I found drugs and alcohol, gave me some relief. And then when I quit drinking at 22, I was like, I didn't have anything again because I had not picked up a drink. So my solution was gone. And again, I was like, what the fuck's the point? And I was just sitting there going, fuck, I just want to be happy, man. And we just all want to be happy, right? But I was confused and baffled at the seeming futility of existence. Why? Why are we even here? Gord talked about it. Just to fucking work and die? They show the underlying reasons why they are making a heavy going of life. If you're making a heavy going of life, there's underlying reasons, and it's probably self that you haven't been able to see. Maybe there's a lot of guilt and shame under there that needs to reveal itself. The guilt and shame for me, 6 years sober, went through 4 months of fucking hell. But I knew that it was happening. So I didn't want to put a gun to my head. But if I didn't know that was happening at 6 years sober, because that's when the guilt and the shame from my marriage and all the shit I fucked up came out, was 6 years sober. And I always say, if you don't learn how to deal with the shit will deal with you. It will deal with you. Most people's first batch of shit happens right around year 3. And if you don't change how your recovery is in year 3, that shit'll deal with you and it'll fuck you up pretty good. So these underlying reasons why we make a heavy going of life, leaving aside the drink question, because it's not the fucking issue. The question isn't the drink or the drug. It's not the issue. They tell why living was so unsatisfactory. I'll tell you why my living was so unsatisfactory. Because I put me in front of everything else. I never had a relationship with my wife or my kids or my best friends. I had a relationship with myself and everything was about me, trying to get me happy. Until I blew that up and I started trying to make other people happy and looking at what Aaron said, what and who I am. And like swallowing that pill of humility going, fuck, you're just an asshole. Fuck, you're angry. Fuck, you're violent. Fuck, you treat women like shit. Fuck, you're... And that humility, that pain that my ego needed to be beat up a bit, that's part of it, right? And that's that painful humility that we need. And unless we accept these parts of ourselves, we can't grow out of it. Just like unless I accept I'm an addict or alcoholic to my innermost self, I can't grow into a solution. They show how change came over them. When many hundreds or millions of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. So on the flip side of that, and this is to not disrespect anybody, like if you don't believe that the consciousness of the presence of God today is the most important fact of your life, then I challenge you. Because I know for me that it is today. And I know for Katie that it is today. I know for Richie that it is today. For Tommy, I'm pretty sure. Gordo, like the fellowship of the Spirit, like people, God is everything. In my life today, the worst shit that can happen, that's God. The best shit that can happen, that's God. God is the seemingly good in my life and the seemingly bad. Walking hand in hand with my Creator through everything. And like, I'll give you guys some insight into my life over Christmas. I've had a fucking hard time. So for some reason, I don't know why. I was talking with Tamara about it. I haven't been like fucking centered in this Christmas holiday. I don't know if it's some grief and shame under there. I don't really know what it is, but I know that it's self and I can't always just identify, but I have learned to go through it and I can grow through it. But sometimes because I've been sober 10 years, I've seen this happen a number of times. I gotta be aware, but I can't just start digging into all, well, what is it? What is it? We always want to find the answer. It'll reveal itself, whatever it is, and I'll grow through it and it'll be something later. But it's just part of the way shit goes, right? That I've learned. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of finish off with that. And like, if the presence of God is the number one fact in your life most of the time, because sometimes it goes away because we're in self or shit happens, then I think you're really, really on the right track. And if this isn't true, and then really ask yourself, like, honestly, is this true in my life? And if you say no, not really, I believe that it can be. And I believe self is in the way. And I believe if you understand self and you follow the processes and you find a good mentorship in this program and you follow what's in here, and there's a lot in this book, but in between all the bullshit is exact stuff, exact directions. Those directions is actually what produced the results. And before I turn it over to Gord, we will be using the original manuscript to do step 3. I will bring copies, and for anyone online, we will be using the original manuscript for step 3, all through how it works, step 3. And in that original manuscript, the beginning part of it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our directions. And then it talks about, if you want what we have and you're willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to follow directions. And in where it talks about the A, B's, and C's, it says, you must find God. It doesn't say, may you find God. It says you must find God. And if you don't agree with these A, B's, and C's, it says you ought to reread the book or else throw it away. And so the original manuscript I love to use, and I'll be using it with Amanda to like really emphasize, because there's no wiggle room in the original manuscript step 3. And when you really understand what that step 3 is saying and the directions and the processes, fuck, it hits like differently. And I know Jesse, who some of you know, he also uses the original manuscript for step 3. So anyway, that's about all I have.
All right. I'll be brief because we're at 5 after 9 already. Yeah, we have traveled this dubious path. We beg you to lay aside your prejudice even against organized religion. How many people know Christianity? How many people know Christians? Right? How many of you people would be willing to admit that those are pretty happy people? They're pretty happy, right? Right or wrong, they're happy. How many people know people that practice? Where were you? You were at a dance, a sun dance, or what?
Round dance?
Round dance?
Just recently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those people, they seem pretty happy, right? Even Buddhism, all those monks, even though they're like stuck in dresses and live their lives by themselves, they still seem pretty happy, right? So I don't think it's the vehicle. I think it's our prejudice somehow. However, like I said earlier, however we were taught, we didn't like it, right? The prejudice has to be set aside. And I get every single one of my sponsees to write this very same thing at the front of their book before we even start. Set aside everything you know about life, love, God, and morality. Why do you think I'm telling them to do that? Exactly. To keep an open mind. Just to keep an open mind. To maybe understand that I don't know everything. And that maybe a higher power will reveal something that I need to know. Because I don't know everything. Bill doesn't know everything, contrary to popular belief. Bill doesn't know everything. None of us know everything. We're just either doing God's will or we're doing self-will. And I prefer God's will because it tends to open up these pearls in my life that I need. I sit here and do this. I talk about this at the beginning of the thing, why I do this. But what falls out of doing this with Bill is I get to learn things. I get to improve my connection with God, no matter where that comes from. We learn that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. So that's exactly what I said, right? These people are happy. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. right now I've got a really great example of that. You guys have seen the reels where they put like death metal to those guys in the churches and they're going like this because they've been found with the God. Has anyone seen that? Am I just being crazy? You've seen those reels, right? And they're all flip-flopping around on the stage and in the pews and stuff. And today still I look at that and I go, oh man, these guys are fucking crazy, right? But how different is what they're doing from what you were doing this weekend? Dancing around in dress and
Telling my elder.
yeah. And seeking God, seeking connection with God is all it is, right? So who cares how they do it? Who am I to judge? I'm just a human. I'm just a human being that doesn't understand anything. Who am I? Instead, we look to the human defects of these people and sometimes use their shortcomings. So do you guys remember a guy by the name, was it Billy Graham who robbed everybody and all that? I think it was, right? Billy Graham. He was back when they did this, it was big on TV.
Jim Baker.
Jim Baker, thank you. Big on TV. He was this evangelist that made a shit ton of money, ripping people off for their money. And now I use that, and I swear to God, this is my ability to bullshit myself. I really like to bullshit myself. I've proven it my whole life, and especially in my drinking and using career. I like to bullshit myself, and I did not want to face God and that whole deal for a lot of years. And so I used things like Jim Baker. You know, he's a crook. I had a preacher. I was in recovery out in Abbotsford, BC one time, and we used to go to mission to this church, this Pentecostal church, and they were laying hands on each other, and it was freaky, but all my friends were into it, so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll keep going. And my girlfriend was going at the time, and she loved it. And then they started coming to my house and telling her not to have sex with me anymore because it was out of wedlock, and I'm like, oh, you're ruining my thing here, man. But yeah, I just hated it. And I needed to fool myself into believing that everybody that praised God, everybody that sought spirituality were like those ugly trees. And that was, I found a way that I could just lie to myself. So I've repeated that a couple times. I think you get it. Approaches to sells himself, proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than themselves. So yeah, every single story, every one of my sponsees is shocked when I tell them this, and then I really understand that they haven't read any of them at that moment. But every single one of these stories, from the pioneers to the very end, are all about how these people sought and found a relationship with a higher power and what that has changed in their lives. Most importantly, what having found that relationship and grown upon it, two very important words, grown upon it, or three words, every single one of those is about that. So today, I get to talk about how I found my higher power. I get to talk, and I say this story. You guys may have heard, some of you may have heard this when I talk about sitting with this guy, and he said it earlier, at 3 years sober, wondering why my life hadn't changed, feeling sorry for myself because I wasn't financially set yet. And he talked to me, and he said, well, that sounds like a lot of me, a lot of self. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And we didn't talk much more after that. I left, but I went to my truck and I started crying because God hit me in that moment. Boom, right in the face. And then I started looking at my life and the relationship with my wife that you know, I'd been married to for 20 years already, 21 years at 3 years sobriety. And that was wonderful. And the relationship that I had rebuilt with my daughters was beautiful. And they relied on me. My brother said that I was a calm, sturdy person in his life, that he could come to it with anything. 3 years sober. And I'm sitting here in this guy's office bitching and complaining about my life because my finances weren't in order yet. Selfish.
I remember that. It was like a whole lot of self-pity.
Oh,
And he was trying,
I was trying hard.
but he hadn't let that go. And he at least, Jesse was there with me, right? And we both were hard on him and said, you haven't fucking surrendered your finances, bro. You haven't surrendered your career. And
Because I was also successful when I blew up my life. Very successful. So I thought I could will my way back to that. But it wasn't me that willed my relationships with my wife and my kids, my family. It was God. I let God do that. It wasn't me that stayed sober and did the steps and did the work and learned how to help people. It was God that did that through me. But I kept on trying to will myself. Thank you, Bill. Will my success. And in that moment, through tears, I don't mind telling you guys, I was bawling. I said, holy shit. I had no idea that I was doing this, God, and I'm sorry. I don't know what your will for me is in these terms. And if it means that you need me to be poor and struggle financially for the rest of my life now, which I don't think that's what you want, still being I really don't think that's what you want. But if it is what you need me to do because I was so successful before and I blew it, then that's what I will do, because I recognize in this moment that the rest of my life is far better today than it was 3 years ago. So I will do whatever you need me to do. And inside of a week, I got a job at where I am today. I shit you not, inside a week. I could not get a job for 3 years. Inside of a week, I got a job with Backley Construction.
And what I want to add is the beatings continued until the lesson was learned.
That's right.
And the beatings were, he was beating himself with self and he wouldn't learn the lesson. And then eventually he heard what he needed to hear because he at least had himself in the mix of people that were doing this. And then he got it and he fucking surrendered it and got to the point where he just said, fuck it. I'll just do whatever. And
But
can you run the mic?
But more importantly, I want to just really back what Billy was saying earlier about doing the deal, right? That step 10, working on the 6 and 7, right? And that all coming to fruition because in the step 10, I just kept doing the things. And yes, I kept learning the lesson. I kept feeling the pain. And finally, I got the right 12-step members to give me the feedback that I needed. And because I kept trying and kept working and saying, what the fuck is wrong? What do I need to do? Because like he also said earlier, we can't see self when we're in it. My sponsor says that to me all the time. He's like, I just let you talk until you find, and then I make a little comment because I don't want to say, oh, you're being self-pity, because I hate that, by the way. I hate it when people tell me that, but it's true most of the time. I can't see it. And it takes someone strong or somebody that God has put in my path to tell me, to open it up for me. What do you got?
Thanks. I just want to say, like, what you guys are saying and what you shared, Katie, it's just like, I'm getting a feeling like the pain and the hope and grace that comes from it, right?
Yeah, man.
But my question would be like, masochist in me is like, is it necessary?
Yes,
Like,
It is.
yes? Yeah.
it is.
Okay. That's what I was feeling. And I'm like, right? To tell you the truth, and for like new guys that I'm with, that
Makes you
super
hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the line in the book that talks about that is, it's in the 12 and 12. It talks about pain is the pathway to all spiritual progress, is the touchstone. And because the ego is so prevalent in our lives, and it actually is what we run on, the pain that you suffer is only pain of the ego. The pain that we suffer is all ego pain, because the love part of you, it doesn't feel that. And love doesn't feel the pain, because love is love, and love has a different kind of pain that's not like the ego pain. It's not a suffering pain. It's like, it's different.
Eckhart Tolle speaks a lot about that. If you've ever read one of his books, it's incredible how he breaks down ego. It's all ego.
Or A
Everything.
Course in Miracles. If you've ever heard of that book, fucking give that a listen.
Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, just speaking to the pain, I think for myself, like the first time I was in like really, really deep pain, like it was scary. And I don't think my faith in God had grown enough to know that like I was gonna come out of it, and I couldn't see the big picture, right? But I think every time that it's happened, I've seen that God had something better in store. And through that process, my faith in God has grown and my fear has lessened. Yeah, so originally it was really scary. I thought I had to go to the psych ward at one point, but it was like, it turned into this massive ego death experience where like a bunch of revelations were like given to me very quickly. And I did come through it. And as a result, like, you know, going into the experience with my dad, the fear was so much less because I knew God was with me. But I had to experience those first stages to get there.
And I think I'll add that I don't think everyone has to go through as much pain as maybe somebody else. I read something a couple sessions ago. It was in There's a Solution. I read it at a meeting here recently too. To the extent that we have lost the power of choice and drink is to the extent that we need more God. Yeah. To the extent that I identify my being with as the ego or my past or whatever, the more God I will need and the more pain will be. You know, Bill W., and you'll see in the end of We Agnostics, he had a profound spiritual awakening. He turned his will and his life over all at once. So in essence, he didn't suffer a lot of pain for a lot more of his life, as per the literature. But we grow into it more slowly, right? But I'm going to say, like, we can have a huge shift. Like, I'm going to use Richie Callahan. Like, you don't suffer a lot, right? He had a big shift in his life, and it changed everything. And so he doesn't suffer as much as somebody else because his being was able to learn lessons quickly and fucking change how he was. He had a revolutionary change in his outlook upon life. Me, I had to be beaten pretty good, but I don't suffer a lot anymore. And when I say I'm off right now, I'm just off because I don't know why. And I don't need to know why. But it's not like I'm suffering. Like, I'm not fucking, suffering, but it just doesn't feel good. But it is more probably death of the ego. But I find the depressive and the ones that play the victim, and these are very subtle defects of character, they suffer more pain than maybe an egocentric. An egocentric can be shown the truth, whereas some of the depressive type defects, very difficult to show them the truth because their sensitiveness and their obstinacy are really strong, and they don't want to relinquish that fucking protection of themselves. But an egocentric guy, you can just pretty much tell him, like, this is the fucking way it is. And hopefully they'll hear it. They might not, but they're more susceptible to hear the truth than a depressive. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's why Jesse's so effective. And I've worked with way more depressives than Jesse. So I've gotten really good at like using my intuitive thought to really help with the depressives, because it takes more patience, more work, more time, takes longer. But Jesse's really good at like fucking boom, 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 boom. You're fucking humble. Right?
Yes. So the last thing I want to say here is at
You
the
know.
end of what we read, they show how the change came over them. We're still talking about these stories, right? When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives. Now, Bill spoke on that. I have nothing to add. He said it perfectly. They present a powerful reason why one should have faith. And I just want to expand on my thought on that second part of that statement. I told you everything about that moment that I had with Bill and Jesse and then my truck and with God and that was great. But I'd love to tell you that it just got better right away, but it didn't. And that's what I tell to guys. I say, listen, man, we go through struggles. I also just went through something where I was getting angry. And you know what? I came out the other side, lots of talking with my sponsor, a lot of praying, a lot of meditating. And I think I even mentioned it here at one point, how I was getting angry with people. And I yelled at an appraiser who was directly responsible for giving me $1.8 million in work. Like, that's not good. I'm going to lose business, right? If I don't find out what the fuck is going on with me. And I found out my ego wasn't allowing me to take a break. I thought I needed to be in that office at all times so that I could watch everything that was going on and I could control everything, because I have a lot more staff than I did 5 years ago. When in fact, I just need to trust, and I needed to take a break, and I took a break. And I got back to work today, and I took another break. I rolled in and went, February 1st to 15th, I'm going to Mexico. I feel so much better having taken a break. I learned something. I can't control everything. So anyway, over the years, what I'm trying to say is, through the years, I've gone through a lot of these things. Katie talked about it too, right? Going through the pain, and next time the fear isn't as great. I hear you. I mean, that is the beauty of this thing. Going to a meeting, going to a study like this, and hearing what people have to say and how they've conquered things, reading these personal stories, which it directly relates to what we're saying here, what's written. We all learn that God has become the most important thing in our lives. But how did we learn that? It comes back to learn to concede. It's the same thing. I learned through trial and error. I learned by practicing these simple things. And then all of a sudden I look backwards in my life. I don't know what God's will is. I want to really state that for you all right now. I'm human. I have no idea what God's will is. And all the meditation and prayer that I can offer and all the talking to Bill, I'm never going to know what God's will is until I look backwards in my life and I see how it has changed me. I've seen how it has taught me. I've seen how it has benefited the people that I love and the people around me. That's God. I just have to show up and try not to be a dick every day and try to be open enough to do the simple things like talk to friends that I trust and find out where I'm going wrong and then try to correct it. That's all I have to do. And then I look backwards in my life and I get to see God. That's all I got.
Beautiful.
Yeah,